Despite setting SMART goals for a decade, I kept failing at most of them. That frustrating cycle continued until one sleepless night when I finally recognized the psychological barriers holding me back, and everything changed. Today I'm going to show you why traditional goal-setting methods might actually be sabotaging your success. You'll discover the exact 5-step system that transformed my approach completely. This practical framework addresses the hidden mental blocks that conventional advice ignores. If you've ever wondered why you keep falling short despite your best intentions, this video is specifically for you. Stay tuned for the surprising insights that changed everything for me. Why goal setting actually matters. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to achieve everything they set their minds to, while others stay stuck in the same place year after year? I used to think it was just about willpower or maybe even luck. But after diving into this for years, I've realized the difference isn't what most people think. Goals are powerful tools that help our brains create meaning and direction in our lives. Think about it. Without a destination in mind, you can't effectively navigate your path forward. Your brain has a fascinating feature called the reticular activating system, RAS, which acts as your attention's filtering system. It decides what information reaches your awareness and what gets filtered out. When you set specific goals, you program your RAS to notice opportunities related to those goals that would have otherwise gone completely unnoticed. I experienced this firsthand when I decided to buy a particular model of car. Suddenly, that exact car appeared everywhere on the road. The cars were always there, but my brain hadn't been programmed to notice them until I set that goal. Similarly, a friend of mine decided to start a podcast about urban gardening. She told me how she suddenly began spotting community gardens in neighborhoods she'd walked through for years without noticing them, and conversations about sustainable food seemed to pop up everywhere. When you set meaningful goals, you're telling your brain, "This matters to me, so pay attention to anything related to it." It creates a mental spotlight that automatically highlights relevant information and opportunities in your environment. I used to roll my eyes whenever someone at work started talking about goal-setting exercises. It felt like one of those corporate activities people do to feel productive without actually accomplishing anything. But then something clicked for me. I realized goal-setting wasn't about checking boxes or impressing my boss. It connected to something much deeper, my own sense of purpose and direction. Without clear goals, I was drifting, reacting to whatever came my way instead of moving purposefully toward what mattered. And that difference between drifting and directing affected everything about how I felt each day. Goals give you a reason to get up every morning with energy and focus. They create a sense of purpose that makes even ordinary days feel meaningful, because you know you're moving towards something that matters to you. Consider how video games keep you engaged with progress bars that visually fill up as you advance. Goals work similarly in real life. They provide a way to measure progress, to see that your efforts are accumulating, even when daily activities don't feel particularly exciting. When you understand this psychological foundation, goal setting becomes less about forcing yourself to do things you don't want to do, and more about aligning your daily actions with what genuinely matters to you. It shifts from being about willpower to being about clarity and alignment. This is why most people fail to achieve their goals despite having good intentions. It's not because they're lazy or don't want it enough. It's because they don't understand the psychological foundation that makes goals work. They're attempting to use a powerful tool without reading the instruction manual. Understanding why goals matter is just the beginning. Before we can build better goals, we need to recognize what's stopping us from reaching them. We've all experienced goals we were excited about that somehow fizzled out over time. There's something about our brain's wiring that can work against us when pursuing something new. Our minds are incredibly good at protecting us from change, even positive change. This protection often manifests as procrastination, self-doubt, or suddenly finding more important things to do. I remember setting a goal to write a book. I was initially excited about it. But weeks passed, and I barely wrote anything. It wasn't because my interest had faded. It was because whenever I sat down to write, my brain generated 100 urgent tasks I needed to do first. Or it suggested that whatever I wrote wouldn't be good enough anyway. What I didn't realize then was that these weren't random thoughts or legitimate concerns. They were my brain's protection mechanisms activating, trying to shield me from the discomfort of change, the possibility of failure, or the uncertainty of trying something new. The way we think about our goals matters just as much as the goals themselves. If you set a goal to lose weight, but deeply believe you lack discipline with food, your actions will eventually align with that belief, not with your stated goal. Your subconscious beliefs will prevail. That's why understanding the psychology behind goal achievement is crucial. Without addressing the mental barriers and limiting beliefs that stand in our way, we're trying to drive with one foot on the gas and one on the brake. We might move forward slightly, but we'll waste energy and likely won't progress far. What distinguishes someone who consistently achieves their goals from someone who doesn't? It's about understanding how your mind works and creating a goal achievement system that works with your psychology. The most successful people have learned to recognize and work around the mental roadblocks that trip up most people. They understand that goal achievement is as much about managing your mind as it is about managing your time or resources. The hidden saboteurs in your mind. Mental roadblocks aren't just temporary obstacles. They're deeply embedded programming in your brain that's been running since childhood. What if I told you that the reason your past goals failed wasn't because you're lazy or unmotivated, but because you've been fighting against invisible scripts written into your mind years ago that basically guarantee you'll sabotage yourself right before breakthrough moments? Let's be real. We all have these hidden saboteurs in our minds. They're the reason why that new workout routine suddenly feels impossible by week 2, or why that online course sits unopened after the initial excitement wears off. These are deeper patterns, not random occurrences or life simply getting in the way. Think about it like this. Your brain contains limiting beliefs that act like invisible walls between you and what you want. The tricky part? You can't see them. Most of us don't even know they exist because they operate below our conscious awareness. It's like trying to fight an invisible opponent. Virtually impossible. These limiting beliefs originate primarily during childhood. All those messages from parents, teachers, and painful childhood experiences sink deep into our subconscious and take root there. When someone told you you're not good at math or you always quit things as a kid, your young mind absorbed that as absolute truth. These become part of your identity. I remember being told I wasn't the creative type because I struggled with art. Even though I've accomplished creative projects as an adult, that little voice still whispers, "This isn't really you," whenever I start something artistic. These beliefs feel natural and true, making them particularly dangerous. That critical inner voice emerges right when you're making progress, saying things like, "You're not the kind of person who can do this," or "You always quit eventually." It disguises itself as practical thinking or protection from disappointment, feeling completely reasonable in the moment. I spent years jumping between productivity systems, thinking I just hadn't found the right method. I tried fancy planners, time-blocking techniques, and countless apps. Nothing stuck. My real problem wasn't the system, it was the beliefs running in my mental background. I had this deep-down belief that I was naturally disorganized and not a disciplined person. No planning system could overcome that programming. As my colleague Michael shared after finally launching his business after years of hesitation, I realized the voice telling me I wasn't ready wasn't protecting me. It was keeping me small. Once I recognized that belief as optional rather than fact, everything changed. The thing about these beliefs is they don't feel like beliefs at all. They feel like facts, just the way things are. When you believe deep down that you're not capable of something, it doesn't register as a limiting belief. It feels like you're simply being realistic about your abilities. This is why they're so effective at stopping us. We don't recognize them as obstacles that can be questioned or changed. Let's examine some common mental barriers that keep us stuck. Fear of failure leads to avoidance, procrastination, and lack of confidence. When you believe mistakes define who you are, you become terrified of trying. It's about the belief that failure proves something fundamentally lacking about you as a person. Perfectionism works similarly. Having high standards seems positive, but perfectionism goes beyond excellence. It's a limiting belief that nothing you do is ever good enough. Research shows perfectionists can become completely fixated on tasks and unable to complete them on time just to prove their flawlessness. They'd rather not finish something than submit work that's less than perfect. The constant pressure to succeed is intensifying in our society. Whether it's getting into a good college, climbing the corporate ladder, or fitting into unrealistic molds of perfection, this pressure damages mental health. The research clearly indicates something significant is happening. This pressure often stems from comparing ourselves to others, worsened by social media. Social media has created a comparison machine that makes us feel constantly inadequate. Looking at seemingly perfect lives triggers what researchers call social comparison rumination, obsessing over how you don't measure up. With social media, it's easier than ever to compare your behind-the-scenes reality with everyone's highlight reel. What's fascinating is how these limiting beliefs trigger self-sabotage, just when success starts feeling within reach. You might suddenly lose interest in a project right when making real progress, or pick a fight with someone supporting your goal. That's your limiting beliefs activating because you're approaching their established invisible ceiling. For some groups, these challenges intensify. Research indicates achievement culture can be particularly difficult for immigrants and people of color, who are motivated to build better futures while simultaneously dealing with racism and discrimination. The pressure isn't distributed equally. These limiting beliefs create an invisible ceiling, preventing you from imagining what's possible. When you can't envision success, your actions align with that limited vision. They trigger self-sabotage behaviors when you approach success. This self-sabotage happens because success would contradict your deeply held belief about yourself. If you believe you're not the kind of person who succeeds, then succeeding creates cognitive dissonance, a mental conflict between your identity and reality. Your brain hates this dissonance. It would rather make you fail to maintain consistency with your self-image than allow success that forces an identity update. That's why people often mess things up right before breakthrough moments. They lose interest in projects, create crises demanding attention, or convince themselves the goal wasn't important anyway. It's not conscious self-sabotage. It's your brain maintaining consistency between your actions and beliefs about yourself. Fixed versus growth. The mindset battle. Beneath the self-sabotage we just discussed lies something more fundamental that's actually determining whether you'll push forward or give up when things get tough. Stanford psychologist Carol Dweck discovered that people basically fall into two camps based on a core belief about human potential. And this belief predicts success better than talent, IQ, or background. Think about the last time you faced a real challenge. Did you think, I'm just not good at this and walk away? Or did you think, I can figure this out with practice? That tiny difference in thinking represents two completely different operating systems in your brain. Dweck calls these the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. When you have a fixed mindset, you believe your abilities are set in stone. You either have them or you don't. But with a growth mindset, you see your abilities as muscles that can be developed through dedication and hard work. Let me show you how dramatically different these mindsets play out in real life. When someone with a fixed mindset encounters a difficult problem, their brain actually goes into threat mode. Challenges feel dangerous because they might expose what you lack. Effort feels pointless because either you can do something or you can't. And criticism feels like a personal attack on who you are. I remember working with a client who avoided public speaking opportunities for years. Every time one came up, she'd find a way to delegate it or suddenly have a schedule conflict. When we dug deeper, she revealed that in high school she'd frozen during a presentation and a teacher had said, "Some people just aren't natural speakers." That single comment shaped her entire relationship with speaking. It became more than just an avoided task. It formed a boundary around her identity. She didn't just avoid speaking, she became someone who couldn't speak publicly. This limited her career advancement for nearly a decade until she challenged this belief. The fixed mindset shapes your entire identity. Think about phrases like, "I'm not a math person," or "I don't have a creative bone in my body." These are identity statements that create boundaries around what you'll even attempt. In contrast, the growth mindset transforms your relationship with challenges. When you believe abilities can be developed, challenges, exciting opportunities to stretch yourself, like a muscle becoming stronger through resistance training. Effort becomes the path to mastery rather than a sign of inadequacy. And criticism transforms from a personal attack into valuable information that helps you improve. Dweck's research consistently shows that people with growth mindsets achieve more because they put in more effort and persist longer through difficulties. Everyone experiences setbacks, but the difference is in how they interpret those setbacks. In one study, Dweck and her colleagues followed hundreds of students transitioning to junior high school, when schoolwork typically gets more challenging. Students with fixed mindsets showed declining grades, while those with growth mindsets showed improved performance. The difference wasn't their initial ability, it was how they responded to the increased difficulty. What's fascinating is that we don't have a pure growth or fixed mindset across all areas of life. You might have a growth mindset about your cooking skills, but a fixed mindset about your athletic ability. These mindsets can be domain-specific, limiting you in certain areas without your awareness. So how do you know if you're operating from a fixed mindset? Pay attention to the thoughts that arise when you face challenges. Do you hear internal dialogue like, "This is too hard for me"? Do you avoid situations where you might not excel immediately? Do you feel threatened rather than inspired by others' success? These are all classic fixed mindset indicators. The good news is that mindsets themselves can change. You can shift from a fixed to a growth mindset with awareness and practice. The first step is recognizing those fixed mindset thoughts when they pop up. When you catch yourself thinking, "I can't do this," challenge that thought by adding "yet" to the end. One of the most powerful ways to develop a growth mindset is to deliberately seek out challenges that push you outside your comfort zone. Each time you do something difficult and survive, you're building evidence that abilities can be developed. And when you inevitably struggle, focus on the process rather than the outcome. Try celebrating effort instead of just results. Instead of thinking, "I failed that presentation," try, "I learned 3 things that will make my next presentation better." Instead of, "I'm terrible at networking," try, "I'm developing my networking skills with each conversation." I had a personal breakthrough with this when I decided to learn coding in my 30s. As someone with a humanities background, I'd always told myself I wasn't wired for programming. After learning about the growth mindset, I decided to experiment. I still remember the moment when, after days of frustration, a concept finally clicked. That experience showed me that my abilities could grow with persistence and the right approach. What's particularly powerful about the growth mindset is how it transforms your relationship with failure. In a fixed mindset, failure defines you. It's proof of your limitations. But in a growth mindset, failure is simply information. Valuable feedback that helps direct your next steps. This doesn't mean pretending failure feels good. It doesn't. But it means recognizing that temporary setbacks are part of any meaningful growth process. Instead of thinking, "I failed, therefore I'm a failure," you think, "I failed, therefore I'm learning." The growth mindset also changes how you view others' success. In a fixed mindset, others' achievements can feel threatening. But in a growth mindset, others' success becomes inspirational, proof of what's possible with effort and persistence. You can cultivate this mindset by surrounding yourself with growth-oriented people and reframing how you praise yourself and others. Instead of praising talent, "You're so smart," praise effort, strategies, and progress. "I'm impressed by how you tackled that problem from multiple angles." Why SMART goals aren't enough. While that growth mindset we just explored transforms how you approach challenges, even the best mindset can't compensate for a flawed goal framework. Ever wonder why your perfectly crafted SMART goals still end up abandoned by February? The problem isn't you. It's that the most popular goal-setting system in the world has a serious blind spot. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you set a SMART goal that actually excited you? You know, those specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound objectives we've all been taught to create. I bet for most of you, those goals felt more like homework assignments than inspiring visions. Here's the thing about SMART goals. They've been around since 1981, which means they're using a 40-year-old framework to navigate today's incredibly complex world. That's like using a paper map when everyone else has GPS. SMART goals were revolutionary when they first appeared, and they do provide a clear structure that's better than having no framework at all. But there's a huge problem with SMART goals that nobody talks about. They focus entirely on the mechanics of the goal itself and ignore the psychology of the person trying to achieve it. It's like having a perfect roadmap, but no car to drive. I learned this the hard way. A few years ago, I set the perfect SMART goal to write a book. It was specific. Write a 50,000-word nonfiction book on productivity. Measurable, track daily word count. Achievable, just 500 words per day. Relevant, aligned with my career, and time-bound, complete in 4 months. Looks great on paper, right? But 3 weeks in, I found myself doing literally anything else but writing. I organized my sock drawer. I deep-cleaned my refrigerator. I even volunteered to help my neighbor move. Anything to avoid working on that book. The goal checked all the SMART boxes, but it completely failed to account for my psychological barriers around writing, my fear of judgment, and my tendency to procrastinate when faced with creative tasks. SMART goals work well for simple, straightforward tasks. If your goal is to drink more water or save a specific amount of money, the SMART framework is perfect. But for complex goals that require creativity, adaptation to changing circumstances, or deep personal motivation, that's where SMART goals start to fall apart. Consider that the A in SMART stands for achievable. While that sounds reasonable, it can actually be a huge problem. When we focus on making goals achievable, we often set our sights too low. Research shows that slightly ambitious goals, ones that push us just beyond our comfort zone, are actually more motivating than easily achievable ones. The achievable part of SMART can limit your thinking and prevent you from setting the kind of ambitious goals that truly inspire action. Many incredibly successful people admit they'd never have accomplished their biggest achievements if they'd limited themselves to what seemed achievable at the start. The 4-minute mile seemed impossible until Roger Bannister broke it. Then within weeks, others did too. The psychological ceiling had been lifted. Another fundamental issue with SMART goals is they assume we're rational beings who will follow through on a logical plan. But humans aren't spreadsheets. We're emotional, inconsistent, and influenced by psychological factors that SMART goals completely ignore. SMART goals don't account for the emotional barriers that stop us from taking action. They don't address limiting beliefs. They don't help us navigate the fear of failure or success. They assume that if the goal is well structured, you'll follow through. And we all know that's not how it works in real life. So what alternatives exist? Several more effective frameworks take a more holistic approach to goal setting. One approach is clear goals: collaborative, limited, emotional, appreciable, and refinable. Unlike SMART goals, clear goals are designed to be more flexible and adaptive. They encourage emotional investment, which recognizes that meaningful goals need to connect with you on an emotional level, not just a logical one. They're also refinable, which means they can evolve as circumstances change, crucial in today's fast-moving world. Another framework is WOOP, Wish, Outcome, Obstacle, Plan. Developed by psychologist Gabriele Ettingen, it's grounded in the psychology of motivation. What makes WOOP different is that it asks you to identify potential obstacles before you start, which research shows dramatically increases your chances of success. Instead of just focusing on the positive outcome, WOOP helps you prepare for the challenges you'll inevitably face. Simon Sinek's Golden Circle approach starts with the why behind your goals. Before getting into the what and how, this framework connects you with your deeper purpose. When I applied this to my goals, I was way more motivated to follow through because I understood the deeper meaning behind what I was doing. For those balancing multiple priorities, the Balanced Scorecard framework offers a comprehensive approach. Instead of focusing on one metric, it helps you evaluate your goals across multiple dimensions, like financial health, client relationships, internal processes, and personal growth. This prevents the tunnel vision that can happen with traditional goal setting. All these alternative frameworks have one thing in common that SMART goals don't. They acknowledge that successful goal achievement isn't just about the structure of the goal itself. It's about connecting that goal to your psychology, emotions, and deeper purpose. I'm not saying abandon SMART goals completely. They still have their place for simple objectives. But for complex, meaningful goals that transform your life, you need a framework that addresses both the mechanics of the goal and the psychology of the person pursuing it. So next time you're setting an important goal, ask yourself, does this goal connect with me emotionally? Have I identified potential obstacles? Is it aligned with my deeper purpose? Does it push me beyond my comfort zone? These questions tap into the paralyzing power of fear. Even with the perfect goal framework, there's a silent saboteur lurking in your mind that can derail everything.